Good day everyone, and welcome to today's injury prevention seminar. Today we'll be discussing ankle mobility, specifically for runners, but it's also great for anyone that has any issues with ankle mobility or stability. The layout of the video is as follows. I'll start off with a general introduction, I'll follow that up with a disclaimer, and then a how to do the movements part. If this isn't your first time listening to this video, go ahead and skip straight to the programming portion. There's two programs that we'll be doing today. We'll start off with a 15-minute ankle mobility programming. I videotaped it once through. However, I recommend that everyone goes through it 3 times. So at the end of the mobility sequence, you can either pause and redo the mobility programming 3 times through at your own pace, or you can rewind and follow along 3 times. Immediately thereafter, there will be the stability programming. Same thing, I videotaped it once through. However, I recommend that everyone does it 3 times. You can either pause, do it at your own pace, or rewind and follow along each time. So for the general introduction, my name is Gabriel Quenville and I am a reconditioning specialist for the Canadian Armed Forces out here at Base 4 Wing Cold Lake. I'm an employee of the Personnel Support Programs, which is PSP for short, as you can see with the 2 banners or the PSP logo along my t-shirt. As part of my role for the reconditioning specialist, I am mandated to deliver injury prevention and active living seminars to military members alongside the health promotion department and the physiotherapy department. Since COVID-19 pandemic, we have decided to go virtual, meaning that I'm now delivering these programs virtually via YouTube. And now these programs are accessible to all. So whether you're military or not, if you have any ankle issues in terms of mobility or stability, or if you want to do some injury prevention because you're going to be running a lot more, then this video is for you. As you know, a lot of us no longer have access to gyms, and I've noticed a lot of people on my newsfeed who don't typically run are starting to run a lot more. Whether you're an avid runner or you're starting to run, this series is going to be for you. Today we're going to be talking about ankles. Next week we're going to talk about the hips, and then we're going to be discussing shoes and conditioning for running. With that, here's the general disclaimer that I need to read out before we get started. In response to the COVID-19, PSP is offering tele-fitness to Canadian Armed Forces members. By using social media platforms, the tele-fitness classes tailored to Canadian Armed Forces personnel become accessible to all. Prior to participating in this session, and to make an informed decision on whether you should seek advice from a qualified exercise professional or healthcare provider, consult the Get Active Questionnaire of the Canadian Society of Exercise Physiology and its reference document. You can do so by simply clicking on the links below. By continuing with this tele-fitness class, you understand that there is the possibility of physical injury and you agree to do so voluntarily at your own risk. You also assume all risk of injury and agree to release the Canadian Forces Morale and Welfare Services from any and all claims related to your participation in this tele-fitness class. With that, let's get started on the how to do the movements. Follow along. We're going to start with the mobility portion. There's going to be a passive stretching portion, an active range of motion portion, and then a passive range of motion portion. First, we're going to start off by explaining why we want good ankle mobility for running. Well, when we're running, on the takeoff, we want to make sure that we have sufficient plantar flexion, or the ability to point our toes down as we press through the ground and lift off. The remainder of the swing and the land requires sufficient dorsiflexion, or lifting the toes up. After you've pressed through the ground and pointed the toes to get a good lift off the ground, you need to bring your heel up and dorsiflex that toe through the remainder of the swing before you land underneath your body. A good landing or foot strike requires your heel to be approximately shoulder at the level of your shoulder. So the front of your shoulder should be where your heel lands. In order to do so, you need to have good plantar flexion and then good dorsiflexion throughout the remainder of the swing. The first movement that we're going to do is a passive stretch to help with our plantar flexion. Basically, we're going to come down into this position, and then we're going to sit down as far back as we can until we feel a nice good stretch down that front part of the ankles and up along the front part of our lower leg. Some of us may not have sufficient mobility to get the ankle flush to the ground. That's okay. Let's say this is as far as you can get, where you're getting a nice good stretch and you're not feeling any pain. That's going to be a common recurrence in this programming. If you ever feel any pain, you've gone too far and you need to ease off. So let's say this is the furthest point that you can go. In order to be nice and comfortable, I recommend you go on all fours, on hands and knees, or that you grab objects that you can place your hands down and support yourself with your arms so that your quads aren't working too much. So for me, I'm going to place my hands down here, and I'm going to, as I'm breathing, actively try to press my heels into the ground. So I'm actively trying to press my ankle into the ground and trying to remove this space. Now let's say you have sufficient mobility to have your ankles nice and flat on the ground. From your knee all the way to your toe, there's no space underneath there. Well, that's good. And if you're comfortable there, go ahead and stay there. Otherwise, place your hands on the ground and lean your hips back until you feel it. So let's say this is where you're feeling it. You're going to be staying there and breathing through the exercising. Every exhale, try to maybe go a little bit deeper, and if you're feeling pain, ease off. If you're not feeling pain, then go ahead and keep trying to get deeper. For individuals who are more flexible, you may be able to sit down your bum all the way onto your heels as you're pressing your ankles into the floor. That's excellent. In this position, make sure that you're staying nice and tall, you're keeping a nice flat back, and your core is nice and engaged. And we're just going to sit down and hang out here, so long as you're feeling that stretch in the anterior portion of that lower leg. For some of us, that might not be sufficient, so we might need to go a little bit deeper. In order to go deeper, what we do is we raise our toes. So right now, for me, I've set about a 1-inch block where I'm going to lift my toes on them, and that's going to allow me to get into a nice deep stretch. For some people, you might need to go 2 inches, 3 inches, maybe even 4. What I've done is I've rolled up my second yoga mat in order to accomplish this. You can do so with a towel, you can roll up hoodies, you can find anything that's nice and comfortable for your feet, roll it up to the height that is good for you, and place your toes on them as such. With my toes elevated and my hips sitting down and my ankles being pressed into the floor, I'm able to feel that stretch adequately along the anterior portion of my lower legs. This still might not be enough for some people. So what you can do is you can actually feel that stretch all the way up the anterior portion of your body, up your quadriceps, up your core, and into the arms, simply by laying back. Now that is too much of a stretch for me, but I'll show you what that would look like. Basically, you're leaning back and you're either going into your arms without allowing your knees to lift and ensuring that your hips are nice and tilted so that your core is engaged. We don't want to have an excessive rounding of that lower back. And you can feel the stretch not only down the anterior portion of the lower leg, but the anterior portion of the upper leg, also most commonly referred to as the quadricep muscles. If you're able to, you can go down onto your elbows, which I am not able to do, so I will not demonstrate that. Or you can lay flat on your back and raise your hands up to open up, making sure that your core stays tight and you're not bending with the back to reach, but you're lifting up with the arms. So those are the modifications for the first stretch that we'll be doing today. This stretch also acts as a good measurement of whether you have good plantar flexion flexibility. If you're unable to lay completely flat on your knees and to sit your bum onto your heels, this is definitely a limitation for you, and I would strongly encourage you to work on your ankle plantar flexion. If this stretch does not work for you because it causes pain, then please seek out a qualified exercise professional, a physiotherapist, or someone that has the appropriate credentials to assess you and to give you a personalized plantar flexion mobility program. The next thing that we're going to do is work on our dorsiflexion. So this one, what we do is we put our toe as far away from the wall as we can and bring our knee in towards the wall without lifting up our heel. If the heel is lifting up, we know that the toe is too far. So let's shimmy that toe a little bit closer and then bring our knee to the wall. Continue to do that until you find the furthest point from the wall where you can bring your knee to the wall and your heel doesn't lift up. Let's say I'm going here and I'm not feeling the stretch. Well, let's go a little bit further back and try it from there. Still not feeling stretch. Let's shimmy a little bit further back and go from there. This is the nice place for me, so this is where I'm going to stay. This stretch also acts as a very good measurement of your dorsiflexion. In order to establish good dorsiflexion, we want to be able to have our toes 12 centimeters away from that wall, and that's approximately 4 inches. So if you have a ruler, go ahead and place that ruler beside the wall and measure how far away your toes are when you're doing this stretch. If you're not yet at 12 centimeters, you know that this is something that you definitely need to work on. If you're already at 12 centimeters or more, then I would still encourage you to do this stretching. However, you may not need to incorporate it every single day. You may only need to do it 2 or 3 times a day, or a week, in order to maintain that good mobility rather than work on that improvement. So another thing we need to worry about with this one is bilaterally, are there any differences? If my left leg is at 14 centimeters and my right leg is at 18 centimeters, yes, that's demonstrating that both have sufficient ankle dorsiflexion, but there's an asymmetry on both sides. So what we want to do is that side that's at 14 centimeters in this case, let's say it's my left leg, I'm going to want to spend a little bit more TLC on that side. So maybe try to hold that stretch a little bit longer than the programming that we'll be doing today, vice the right side. Today our programming is going to be holding each stretch for 30 seconds. So if you're noticing an asymmetry bilaterally, then what I want you to do is pause the video when we get to the ankle dorsiflexion stretch. The side that is not as flexible, I want you to spend at least 15 to 30 seconds more, so long as there's no pain. With all these movements, we always want to make sure that there's no pain. And then once you're done that, resume the video and keep following along. That is the passive stretching component of our mobility sequence today. The next thing we're going to do is an active range of motion mobility sequence. So what that means is that we're going to use the muscles about the joint to actively move the joint around its full range of motion. Once again, if you're feeling pain here, that's not a good sign. Please stop this programming and seek a qualified exercise professional for an individual consultation and an assessment where they can further look and assess and try to help improve your ankle mobility without causing pain. What we're going to do is we're going to either sit cross-legged like such, holding onto our ankle or underneath our knee if that's more comfortable, or simply laying that foot down on an elevated surface, the calf on an elevated surface. If you have a lacrosse ball, then that, or a golf ball or a tennis ball, you may want to elevate your calf on that so that you can get a nice, good, deep tissue massage in your calf at the same time as you're doing this programming. It's kind of a win-win. I don't have a lacrosse ball here or a tennis ball, so I'm just going to be doing the active range of motion component by itself. However, if you do have one, simply place the lacrosse ball underneath your calf, apply pressure, and move up and down the calf until you find a nice tender spot. Once again, we don't want to cause pain, but the most tender component part of that calf is where you want to stop. So long as there's no pain, keep it there and then do your programming from there. The programming is going to be as follows. You're going to go into dorsiflexion as far as you can, then plantar flexion as far as you can, and keep going back and forth for 10. After that, we're going to go clockwise for 10, and we're going to follow that up with counterclockwise ankle rotations for 10. And we'll do that on both sides. Once we're done our active range of motion component of the ankle mobility, we move on to the passive range of motion component of the ankle mobility. So passive range of motion means that we're not actively using the muscles about the joint to move the joint, but we're using an external force. In this case, I'm going to use my own arm to move my ankle. So I find it most comfortable to be in this cross-legged position. I'm going to press my foot in plantar flexion as far as it goes, and then I'm going to press it back in dorsiflexion as far as it goes. And I'm going to keep doing that. So long as there's no pain, I'm good to keep going. We'll do 10 on one side, 10 on the other, and then we'll start the program again for 3 rounds. Once we've done that, we'll move on to the stability component of this programming. The stability component is standing, and we'll be walking approximately a distance of 10 meters. If you don't have 10 meters, like me, what you can do is back and forth until you've reached a distance of 10 meters. So for me, I have a 3-meter wide basement. So I'll be walking 3 meters 3 times, and I'll only be covering 9 meters. It's only an approximation. It doesn't have to be exact. As well, if you're finding 10 meters is too far, then you can shorten it down to 5 meters and work your way up to that 10-meter range. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to practice walking on our tippy toes. While we're walking on our tippy toes, we really want to focus on that balance in our core. We want to have a nice posterior pelvic tilt, our core is engaged, and our rib cage is down. While we're doing this, we want to try to prevent the knees from buckling in. That's going to require our glutes to be activated. And we want to try to avoid the ankles from falling out or in. Once you're able to have that nice, good balance, we want to tiptoe nice and slow across until we've reached that 10-meter distance. If you notice, I'm not taking these nice big steps. That's not the point. The point isn't to cover the distance quickly. It's to get as many steps as possible in the distance covered. So if you're getting 50 steps by 20 steps, that's a lot better. Once again, we're up on our toes. We're trying to prevent the ankles from going out or in. We're trying to engage our glutes so that our knees don't buckle in. And we're really focusing on strengthening those little muscles that we're not used to strengthening without our arches collapsing. The next part is going to be in dorsiflexion. We're going to lift our toes up as high as we can, and same thing, nice little walks forward on our heels. We're working on strengthening those little muscles that we don't normally strengthen, and we're working in that dorsiflexion. After that, we're going to go on the outside of our feet, and we're going to walk nice and slow. And we're going to finish that off with walking on the inside of our feet, walking nice and slow. If you notice, when you're walking on the inside of your feet, you might naturally bring your knees in. Let's try to activate those glutes and keep those knees out while we keep those ankles rolled in. We're working on strengthening all those little muscles around the ankle that we don't normally strengthen. As always, and as with every single one of these movements, if you feel pain, this programming is not for you, and please stop this programming immediately. On that note, let's get started with our programming. Alright guys, so now that you know how to do all the movements, let's get started. Find your modification for that first movement, the plantar flexion stretch, and we're about to get started in 3, 2, 1, sit down and hold this position. We're going to hold this position for 30 seconds. Remember to breathe deep into your belly and into your lower back, And as you exhale, try to go a little bit deeper into this stretch. We're picking the hardest modification where we don't feel any pain, but we feel a nice deep stretch down the anterior portion of our lower leg. We're here for another 5 seconds, and then we're going to stand up and go and do our dorsiflexion stretch. 3, 2, 1. Slowly come out of that by rocking forward, lifting your feet up, standing up, and then walking over to that wall. We're going to bring our toes as far away from the wall as we can, knees to the wall. Test, maybe go a little bit further, a little bit closer. Make sure that that heel doesn't lift and that there's no pain. And that's a good distance for me, so I'll get started here in 3, 2, 1, stretch. We're going to hold 30 seconds on the right leg, and then we'll hold 30 seconds on the left leg. Remember, in this position, same as before, we're breathing deep into the belly and the lower back, into all 4 quadrants of our abdominals. We're keeping our knee pressed onto that wall, our toe as far away from the wall as we can without lifting that heel, feeling no pain in the calves, and that stretch nice and deep in the calcaneal tendon. 3, 2, 1, slowly come out of that. Replace your right foot with your left foot, or your left with your right, whatever side you were just stretching. Come back in. 3, 2, 1. Let's get started. 30 seconds here. Same as the other side, we want to make sure that we are not lifting up the heel. Our knee is staying on that wall. We're getting a nice deep stretch in the calcaneal tendon, also known as the Achilles tendon. And we're just sitting here and holding, breathing into all 4 quadrants of our abdominals. Good work here. 3, 2, 1, come on out of that. Great work. Let's move on to the active range of motion component. So for me, I'm going to be placing my foot, my calf elevated on my mat. Like I said before, if you have a lacrosse ball, go ahead and place it underneath there. Find that spot that's nice and tender. I'll let you guys find that spot. When you found it, press in, and let's get started. 10 ankle presses. We're gonna go up and down into that plantar flexion. Dorsiflexion, plantar flexion. Good, let's keep going for 10. You wanna make sure that you're going at that full range of motion, and you're trying to get deeper and press deeper every single time. The goal here is to try to actively increase that range of motion about the ankle. We've got 2 more, 1 more, and that's it. Keeping there, let's go clockwise or counterclockwise, circles all the way around, and we're gonna go for 10. That's 3. Pressing as far down, as far in, as far up. Out, down, in, up. That's 5. Good work. This shouldn't be hard, this shouldn't be challenging. This is all injury prevention measures to try to increase that ankle mobility and that ankle range of motion. We're going 1 more time and switch directions. Good work. And the reason that we're doing that, as I've explained before, is to try to increase our plantar flexion so that we can take off on our run more easily, and our dorsiflexion, which is extremely useful during that recovery portion of our gait and when we land on the ground. Let's do 1 more circle here and switch sides. For those of you who are using that lacrosse ball, I'll give you guys some time to get into that position. Find that nice tender spot. Press into that lacrosse ball. Make sure that your back is nice and neutral here, neutral spine position, your core is engaged. And when you're ready, join me, let's get started. Toe point down, toe point up. We're going for 10. Let's go as far as we can through this range of motion. And let's really work on those ankles. Now you might not be a runner. This mobility programming is still beneficial if you've noticed that you have issues with your ankle mobility or stability as tested in the first 2 stretches. Let's go one more toe point and back up. Let's go clockwise or counterclockwise for 10. We're going in that full range of motion. Try not to cheat here. Really work on getting that full range of motion all the way around about the ankle joint. That's 7. Good work. Keep going. 8, 9, and 10. Let's go the other way. Good work. Once we're done this, we're going on to that passive range of motion. So passive meaning that we're not actively using the muscles about the ankle to move the ankle. We're moving an external force. In this case, we're going to be using our own arms to move the ankle. 2 more. 1 more. And here we go. I prefer doing this in this position here. We're going to move that out of the way. I'm going to press that in and pull that down. Feeling no pain here. If you're feeling pain, please stop and refer yourself to a qualified exercise professional who can further assess. That's 3. We're going for 10. 4, 5. Good work. Really pressing into that joint. Really trying to increase that mobility. We've got 8 there, 9, 1 more each, and plantar flex. Good. Let's switch sides and we'll be done round 1 of 3. Unless you've rewound this video, then you've done round 2 of 3 or round 3 of 3. If you've done 3 rounds, go ahead and move on to the stability portion of the ankle programming, which is coming up next. That's 7. That's 8. That's 9. And that's 10. Good. Feel free to pause here or rewind and do this 3 times through, or stand up and join me for the stability portion. For the stability portion, we're walking 10 meters. We're starting up on our toes. Let's go. Nice little walking all the way across. If you don't have 10 meters, maybe you don't have any meters, just walk forward, back, for the duration that I'm walking forwards. Nice little steps. Remember in the how-to portion, what I explained, let's make sure that those knees don't buckle in. That means that we're activating our glutes. Let's make sure our hips are tilted and our core is engaged. And let's prevent those ankles from pronating or falling in. Let's also prevent them from falling out. That's less common, but something that we also want to work on. And that's 9 meters for me. Let's go up onto our heels in 3, 2, 1. Lift those toes up as high as you can. Really squeeze the quadricep muscles, still activating those glutes so our knees don't flare in. Our core is nice and tight and we're standing nice and tall. Your toes are dorsiflexed as high as you can, so you're really working on those anterior muscles of the lower leg, really pulling to try to get your toes high. Those are more commonly known as your flexor muscles in the anterior portion of that lower leg. Let's do one more lap down here. And once we get there, we're going to go on the outside of our feet. And good. You can rest. 3, 2, 1. Let's go on the outside of our feet. And let's do some nice little duck walk all the way across. Good work, guys. Just like every other movement, if you're feeling pain, this programming is not for you. Let's go back across the other way. Nice little steps. One more time. Like I said, your space might be smaller than mine, so you might be doing a couple more outbacks than I am. That's okay. All right, let's go on the inside of our feet And this one is really hard to ensure that your knees aren't buckling in. Let's really work on those glute muscles and keep those knees from buckling in as we walk on the inside of our feet. We're doing nice little steps. We're really focusing on trying to get the outside of our feet up as high as we can, really working those little muscles that we don't typically work on in our general programming. This really helps with the stability in and around that ankle joint. And that's it for now. So, just like with the mobility portion of this ankle programming, you can either pause and replay this stability portion 3 times to follow along, or go on at your own pace. Thank you so much for joining me today. Join in next week for some hip mobility work, and please come back and check this video out every day or every other day for your ankle mobility programming. Thank you and have a great day.